Thank you. And now, good morning. I'm so happy to be back in this space. I'm certainly going to miss the Ada space where I've spoken as a guest for a number of years now. And I have spoken in this space before, and I've always enjoyed coming here, but it's just been quite a while. And I do look forward to your new space, which is coming up in the not too distant future. So today we're talking about, oh, hang on, I got to do this, otherwise I can't resist when there's a candle there. I have to play with it. So today we're talking about awakening. When the Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree about 2,500 years ago, he sat there hoping for a transformation. And he sat for a very long time, and he was transformed. And when people asked him about the transformation, he didn't say, "I am now enlightened," or "I have reached nirvana." He didn't say anything like that. He didn't say, "I am now self-realized." He simply said, "I am awake." What does being awake or being awakened really mean? That's what I'd like to explore, because it can be deep. In the Daily Word, we begin with, "Not merely awake, I am awakened." There's a very, very subtle difference there that we can also talk about. When we say, "I am awakened," or "I am awake," it presupposes a prior state of sleep, doesn't it? So if the Buddha was awake after sitting under the Bodhi tree for that extended period of time, clearly he must have been asleep. Well, what does that mean? He obviously, like the rest of us, went through a normal cycle of sleeping, that is, sleeping in a bed, or in his case, once he was a renunciate, sleeping on the ground with probably a rock or a sack as a pillow. And then he would arise and he would function as we do in our daily lives. So he must have meant something deeper than simply being in the awake state that we are, and that I'm hoping you will maintain until the end of my message. It's not always the case, so, I'm aware of my limitations. But when we say in the Eastern tradition, whether it's Buddhism or Hinduism, when we use the term awake, we mean something very specific, above and beyond what we normally call awake and sleeping. Let me share with you the words of a chant from the Hindu tradition. I'll actually do two to help move this along. From this sleep, Lord, will you wake me? From this dream, Lord, will you wake me? In thee I dive, in thee I rise, in thee I dive, in thee I rise, in thy sea, in thee, in thy sea, in thee. From this sleep, Lord, will you wake me? From this dream, Lord, will you wake me? In thee I'm born, in thee I die, in thee I'm born, in thee I die, to live forever in thee, to live forever in thee. From this sleep, Lord, will you wake me? From this dream, Lord, will you wake me? So what is sleep and what is dream? Then this next one, this is an ancient chant from the region of Bengal in India. And this is interesting because in the Christian tradition, we are always singing to God, right? You can't think, I believe, of anything that is an exception to that, right? When we sing to God. But in the Hindu tradition, sometimes God sings to us. So in this chant called Wake Yet Wake, O My Saint, God is directing this message to us. And it goes, O my saint, wake yet wake, O my saint, wake yet wake, O my saint. You did not meditate, you did not concentrate, you did not meditate, and cast thy time in idle words, O my saint, yet wake, O my saint. Death will be at thy door, and you will not have time anymore to redeem thy soul. O my saint, wake yet wake. That's a little ominous, admittedly. It's like, okay, get on the stick, because you know what? You're gonna die one of these days. It's not meant to put the fear of God, so to speak, into us. It's simply to acknowledge a reality that if we ignore our spiritual practice, we're just going to have to do it all over again, because at some point we will drop from this mortal coil. And the phrase, you will not have time to redeem thy soul, that we're not talking about heaven and hell, of course. We're simply talking about the idea of having to come back again and again to resume our spiritual practice. So in this chant, God is encouraging the devotee, us, to concentrate, and meditate, and simply get with the program of a spiritual practice. In the previous one, from this sleep, Lord, will you wake me? In thee I dive, in thee I rise, in thee I'm born, in thee I die, to live forever in thee. Again, why focus on this metaphor of being awake or in a dream? Because, according to the Hindu scriptures, this world is a dream. But remember, this is a metaphor. We can't take it. We can only take it so seriously. Then we have to parse it and find out what's really being talked about here. For centuries, the West has looked to the East with a very indignant attitude that the theology of the East, again, whether Buddhist or Hindu, was not sufficient, which is why they sent missionaries. And one of the things that the missionaries would say when they got back to the Western lands whence they came is that Hindus and Buddhists just felt that this world was a dream, which means you really don't have to do anything. You don't have free will. There's no need to work. You're just going to meander through life aimlessly. Well, if you look at the countries of Asia, in particular India and China, if you look back to how they existed, say, 1,000 years ago or several hundred years ago, they were hardly idle dreamers who just lay down in the fields and contemplated their navel. These were very successful societies, extremely successful societies. And you did that by putting forth effort, by working. So why would they say that this world is a dream? Well, let's talk about the reality of dreams, if there is a reality. Are dreams real? Are dreams real? Well, some people would say, no, they're not. You know, right? We can say, oh my gosh, I dreamed that I was poor and that I was living on the street. Then somebody says, well, it was just a dream. Okay, well, that means that particular reality isn't a genuine reality, right? Because you're not poor, you're not living on the street. However, there is a deeper reality. So, for instance, if you're seeing a therapist and you tell the therapist, every night I can just guarantee I'm going to have the same dream. I'm going to dream that my mother is chasing me, and that as she is chasing me, she morphs into this monster, and she finally gets me in her clutches, and she destroys me. And I have this dream every night. What is the therapist going to say? I can guarantee you what won't be said. What won't be said is, well, it's just a dream. It's not real. Why are we talking about this? Of course, the therapist is going to look very seriously at that dream, because the dream is causing a genuine effect in this real reality, right? When the patient wakes up with the heart rate going 100 miles an hour, perspiring, clutching to the covers in fear, something is going on, and that something has a reality. So in the same way that the dreams we dream at night are real, we can use that metaphor of dream for all of this, simply because all of this, the physical universe, it is real, but it is a lower reality. And I've used this example more than once. I'm assuming I've used it perhaps in this building and in the Ada building as well. If I was to ask you, is this table solid? Well, look, the candle is on it. The candle isn't going anywhere. I can push on it. Boy, it sure seems solid to me. Well, you know what? That's because it is. However, if a physicist was amongst us, the physicist might get up and say, well, you know, Fred, while it does have a sense of solidity about it, in reality, the table is simply made up of protons, electrons, and there are more spaces between the protons and electrons within the atomic structure than there is matter. And by the way, what is matter anyway but condensed light waves? So the physicist will say, okay, yes, it's solid enough to hold this candle and really anything else we want to put on it, assuming that it can bear the weight. So it is solid enough for our purposes. And yet, in its deepest reality, it is not. It is simply, again, condensed light waves. So in that same way, we can say that this world that we live in is a dream because there is something higher than what we see around us. Because what we see around us, using our senses, and when we look upon these things without a sense of true enlightenment, if we haven't gotten all the way to the top, we see all of this as separate from us. We see this thing as perhaps a separate creation from God, as opposed to an expression of the divine itself, right? So we can exist on two levels in the same way that we can exist on two levels, knowing that the table is solid and knowing that the table is simply condensed light. Two things that seem to be contradictory, but they're not. So in the same way, we respect this reality, this so-called dream reality by acknowledging ourselves as separate beings, right? But in reality, in the deeper reality, we really are part of the One, the Absolute, which is divine. And not only are we all one, but all creation is one. And again, I use the word creation because that's the word we normally say. But when I'm being more deliberate in my speaking, I prefer to use the word manifestation rather than creation. Because creation supposes that there is a creator and a created, and that created is separate from the creator. So if I were to have built this table, I would be the creator, this would be the created, and there's clearly a difference between the two. But according to Hindu Dharma, in our sacred scriptures of the Vedas, the divine did not create, but manifested. And I personally get very excited when I contemplate that as it says here in the Daily Word, realization comes, I am a divine being expressing the goodness, wisdom, and love of God as only I can. Why are we divine beings? Because we are not apart from God. We are part and parcel of divinity. And that's what's exciting. Now, clearly, we can go through the human condition on a daily basis. The aches and pains, the illnesses, the frustrations, the anger. Yes, of course, we can't deny that is still a part of us until, of course, one reaches the very highest stake and becomes completely awake. Even then, even the Buddha, while he awakened, and Jesus awakened, all of the great ones at some point awakened, and yet they still had to go through the challenges that we all go through in our mortal condition. But we go through them with a different sense, with an understanding that, yes, this is a challenge, whatever it might be, whether it's a bodily challenge or a relationship challenge or whatnot. But in the end, we know that it's ephemeral. It doesn't mean we don't put forth effort. It doesn't mean we shrug our shoulders and say, oh, well, it's just a dream. I'm not gonna worry about how that person thinks of me, or if I did something that was unfair or whatever. I'm just not going to worry about it because it's all a dream. No, of course not. Remember that every religion has loopholes in it for people who really don't want to do the serious work. I'm reminded of my former days as a Roman Catholic, where it was passed around the schoolyard that, you could do anything you wanted. Just go to confession after and you're clean. Well, needless to say, if you spoke to a priest about that, he would say, no, that does not how it works. So the same thing is here. We still have our responsibilities in this dream world. And the highest responsibility we have is, of course, to become awakened. So let me leave you, again, I would like to just chant this one more time, hopefully with a newer sense of understanding of what it means. From this sleep, Lord, will you wake me? From this dream, Lord, will you wake me? In thee I dive, in thee I rise. In thee I dive, in thee I rise. In thy sea in Thee. From this sleep, Lord, will You wake me? From this dream, Lord, will You wake me? In Thee I'm born, in Thee I die. In Thee I'm born, in Thee I die. To live forever in Thee. To live forever in Thee. From this sleep, Lord, will You wake me? From this dream, Lord, will You wake me? Namaste.